So you should be seeing now the ImageLine website. ImageLine is who owns and makes FL Studio. This is the website that you'll want to go to if you were wanting to get FL Studio for yourself at home. All the programs that we'll talk about in this workshop series, including the one tonight, FL Studio, they're available on the Creative Experience computers at both Central and Bar Library. And that's free to use with your library card. You just log onto the computers here. Everything's already downloaded, signed in, and everything for you to use. But if you did want to get it at home, you would want to go to image-line.com. And I believe I put this link in the email that had the meeting link as well, to be able to get to the program. But here you is where you would download it. As you can see, they do have a version that you can get on your phone or iPad. This version, the FL Studio Mobile, I believe you can also get on certain Chromebooks. I don't believe that the library's Chromebooks have the ability for anything to be saved to them, like on like a permanent nature. So you wouldn't be able to do that on our library Chromebooks. But if you had a Chromebook at home, you would be able to do this. Or if you have a smartphone as well, either Android or Apple. And the FL Studio free trial is totally free, no ads or anything. And it's virtually limitless. You can continue to use it as long as you need to. But the catch is that anything you create in it, once you save and close out of FL Studio or your computer turns off, or your computer crashes or something like that, you won't be able to reopen those sessions that you did in the FL Studio program. Now you could email those files to yourself and then come reopen them on the computer at the library. That would work, but you won't be able to reopen them in the program for the free trial program. So the free trial is really great if you want to just like practice making like instrumental beats or practice recording, and be able to use like a really great software for free. You'll just have to know that anything that you create, you can't reopen. Now you could create things and like leave the app open, leave your computer running, as long as it's not like turned off and restarted, as long as the program's still open, and you can export and then save your songs, and that would work. You just won't be able to keep going back and editing multiple songs. And that's because they want you to buy it. So the free trial, I definitely recommend if it's a software that interests you, if you, after this workshop, it's something that you want to try out for yourself at home, if you're not ready to yet come back into the library, or for whatever reason you want to try it at home, the free trial is great. And you can see this big button here, right here, try for free, and then you would download it. It will tell you the system requirements, which is usually just for it to have enough space to run. If your computer doesn't have enough space, or if it's a little bit older, it may still run, but it may run very, very slowly. But yeah, it's pretty much just for Mac or Windows, and then the mobile is for multiple operating systems, but devices may vary as far as Chromebooks. I have a Chromebook at home, and I know there's certain programs that are in the Google Play Store, but I still can't get them on my Chromebook. So it'll just depend. The prices for FL Studio do vary. I believe this is the version we have, is right? The producer edition?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. So yeah, that's the version we have here. It's great. These other ones over here, these ones, they just have just even more bells and whistles. But people have been able to create really great things just using this one here. The $99 one here, this one is great if you plan on only making instrumentals. So any kind of like beat or something like that, because you won't be able to record live audio. So you won't be able to record your vocals over it. You wouldn't be able to record like instruments that you're recording like into a microphone or an interface or something like that. It doesn't allow that, but you can still make virtual music, use a MIDI keyboard, all of that by recording that. You just can't record any live instruments. You would need to get to this version here to be able to do that. These versions here, as they will just have even more plugins than the sort of like base version that we have here. And then there's all kinds of other things you can get added to, more instruments, more plugins, more effects. So I just want to show you here how you can get it if you would like to, how you can get it for free. And it is a perpetual license, I believe. You don't have to keep buying it every year or pay some kind of yearly subscription like some other software. When you own it, you own it. So it's like, it's kind of expensive, but you own it forever. So it's, yeah, pros and cons definitely to the price. Any questions on downloading it or having FL Studio at home or using it here in the library? Okay, awesome. So hopefully you were able to receive the PDF through the email, if not through the chat. So if you're looking here at the first page, we'll be kind of just covered as how to obtain the software, how you would get FL Studio. So now we're going to be going through the following pages. Most of these are going to talk about the layout and the options that are within FL Studio. And then at the end, we'll talk about how to save your project, how to save your files, and then also how to record and how to mix and the different options that they have in FL Studio as far as compression, EQ, reverb, those types of effects. FL has much more than we're going to be able to cover within an hour or less. So this is like just getting to the basics of getting started, either make an instrumental or to record live audio in here. And I do want to say that while FL can record audio in it, it's not my preference to record like live vocals or instruments in here. I have done it and it works just fine. But there are other software that I like to use more for it, just because the workflow is a little more oriented towards recording live instruments, whereas FL Studio is set up. So this is just like what it looks like when you open it. This is kind of set up to be making like beats or instrumental music. It's not as geared towards recording live vocals, which again doesn't mean you can't do it. It's just not my personal favorite to do it in. When I record music, I prefer to make it in here and then export that audio to another DAW. Okay, so getting started on this first page with the layout. So starting right up here in the corner, you have all of these drop-down windows here. So under File are going to be the sort of typical things you'd expect under File. Opening a new project, or starting a new project, opening a project you've already done, saving it, and then importing and exporting files. Down here, any files that you've already made and saved to your computer will show up here. And then here's just a way to exit beyond just using the little X up here in the corner. Oh, question.
Yeah, I'm only seeing the original slide.
It looks like it's still the website.
Oh. Okay. It says I'm still sharing. Okay, let me see. Sorry about that. Okay, how's that look?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so sorry about that. So, so we're, as far as on the PDF, we're this first part of the layout, which is this section up here. If you can see where my mouse is. So under File, we have options to start a new session, open a session we've already made, to save it, import files, and then to export the files. And then down here is where any files that you've created on your computer will be. So this like new stuff.flp, that's that kind of like default name, and it's referring to this file that we're looking at right now. I don't have any previously made sessions here on the computer. FL is great with all these different templates that they have. So if you do the new basic with limiter, that's basically this, what you're looking at here on the channel rack. And a limiter is, if you've been to the other programs we talked about compression, a limiter is a type of compressor. So that would be like, a limiter is like hard compression. So that's sort of like everything a limiter is something that you would definitely hear when it's compressing. So typically when you use a compressor, you want it to be kind of gentle. It's kind of making those highs a little softer, those soft parts a little higher, and it sounds really natural. It sounds almost like it was recorded that way to begin with. When you hear a limiter, it is very clearly compressing and squashing that audio, which is kind of the purpose of a limiter, is that hard compression. So you could start with that where it's just the kick, clap, hat, and snare. And then with the limiter, but you can also hover over here with this new from template, and you have all these different options. So under advanced, this is where you'll get options for all different types of like music styles. So again, FL, as you can see by the way it's setting up the templates and everything, it's really geared towards making those instrumental like songs, those beats. So the templates are even kind of showing you, hey, this is how you create these ones where like, okay, we want to do drum and bass. So it's going to set up the whole session according to what it feels like you would need to make a drum and bass file. So what some people may do with FL, which is not really the way that I use it, but would be, obviously a totally acceptable way to do it, is to sort of like work with one part of a song at a time. So just working with the drums, just working with the guitars and bass, just working with vocals. Oh, let's see.
And we did get a
My chat is
question.
not coming
Is
up.
pattern the same as template?
Pattern? No. So we'll talk about patterns in just a second, but basically patterns, this window right here is called the channel rack. And so if I were to, and I'm just holding down the left side of my mouse and clicking and holding to kind of do this. So these ones that look darker, those are, and this is in like 4/4. So the like gray ones, that's 1 bar. Then these like reddish pink ones are another bar. Then so on and so forth. So this is like 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 are these little rectangles you're seeing here. When they're a lighter color like this, that means that they're being triggered. So what I've just done here would not sound very, very good. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it. So not very, very great. It sounds a lot like noise. But what it's showing there is every time you have one of these triggered, according to your tempo, which this is I think I chose the drum and bass one. It set the tempo at 175 beats per minute, which is very fast. So for 175 beats per minute and then 4/4, that's what that sounds like, is what I've triggered here, which to me sounded a little bit like noise. It was kind of a lot going on. But whenever you see them lighter colored here, that means it's going to trigger it. So like say I had, let me clear this. So if I had one here and one here, that means it would hit once here and then nothing, you would hear nothing here, and then it would hit once here. Now the BPM is 175, so that's going to happen very, very fast. If it was like 60, you would hear like, so that's what it's showing you there, is how that's going to be triggered. What we create whenever we like click these or unclick them, we're creating a pattern. So you can see up here that's pattern 1. You can also name these, which can make them easier to keep track of. So if I right click over where it says pattern 1, I can see where it says rename, and I can say, drums verse. So maybe these are my drums for when the verse is happening. If I left click and I hold and I move my mouse up, I hit where it says pattern 2. And so now I have a blank pattern. This is a totally different pattern. Same channel rack, same instruments, same template, but now it's blank. So now I can create a new pattern. And so I can say, okay, I want all these to go. I want these, and I want these, and I don't want anything else. And now I can rename this one and say drums chorus.
And we did get a question about how did you get to this screen?
The screen where the channel rack, this is part of the template. So when we started the session and we selected the template, it opens these things for you. And yeah, I'm not sure why my chat's not coming. I'm clicking it, but it's not. I don't know where it is.
Can I just unmute for a minute? I don't know how you got here. Where did you find this template? That's what I'm lost about.
So that was up here under File and then New from Template.
Thank you. Okay,
Mhm.
thank
Yep, so File, New from Template, and then this one specifically was under Advanced, and then this was the drum and bass. So yeah, also all these templates will have different options according to the style of music and what instruments and what setup for all the different windows that we'll talk about. What all those different windows they feel like they would need to get you that kind of sound. And that doesn't mean that you would need to use one of these, but they're very helpful, especially if you're just getting started and you're kind of like, wow, there's a lot of instruments, there's a lot of effects, there's a lot of plugins, there's a lot of options in here. How do I narrow it down for me making this type of music or having this type of sound? This will help you. So if I change it now to the chill out, and I don't want to save this one. So now I have different options, and it's even telling me here, here's the chill out advanced template. Um, and so now you can see that our BPM has changed, our tempo changed to 82. We have a little bit different setup for our playlist and as well for our channel rack. And then they've even like kind of put this like swing um, option here. And swing is basically if you didn't have this enabled, then everything is like played exactly how you put it in. Swing is where it's just slightly off. It's sort of just like, which is that like chill out kind of like ambient kind of vibe. So that's what this template is for. And so it's set up all your windows according to that template. This is a like, yeah, definitely one of the more like, complex things where it's affecting every other window. If you were to just do one of the minimal ones here, the only thing it's going to do is really affect the channel rack. So if we go to like the basic 808, you can see it takes away all of the like naming the tracks, everything away from the mixer and everything. And all it's done is given us 808s for all of our drums that are here. So there's very simple options. There's a lot. You could even just do a totally blank one. So if I do minimal and I do empty, I get absolutely nothing. So I get nothing in my channel rack. Sampler basically is that's nothing. So you get a totally blank session when you start here. So the templates can be very helpful, especially getting started if you're new to like making instrumentals and you have an idea, okay, well, I want to make this type of song. It's going to get you started with everything. It's going to get started with a typical BPM. It's going to get you started with the different instruments that it thinks you'll need, and it'll also set up the playlist for you. Under edit, you're going to get typical edit options, cut, copy, paste. And that could apply to anything depending on what you have selected. So if you had, and I'm just left clicking here into the playlist, if I had waveforms here and I had one selected, which is just where I left click on it and I'm holding it here, and I went to copy and paste, I could copy and paste that waveform. So it just depends on what you have selected, what the cut, copy, paste could apply to. So pretty broad options there. You'll also get your undo once you have done something to undo. Under add, this is where you can add any kind of effects or plugins here. So effects would be under other and then effect, and then you'd see all your effects here. So this is where your reverb, any kind of like creative effects. So like distortion, if you wanted distortion on purpose, maybe metal music or something like that. Maybe EDM where it's kind of supposed to have that like crunchy distorted sound. That's where you could add it here. All your compressors, your EQs, flangers, chorus, all those ones, those are like sort of in that like reverb type of thing. They'll affect the way that like the vocal or instrument sounds. And then this is also where your Edison recorder is, which is how you record audio in FL Studio, among lots and lots of other options for effects. And then over here, sorry, under plugins, You can get things like automations. Automation means, so say you had an audio track and you wanted to have it get really loud here, maybe really soft like here. You know, at 1 minute it comes in and then it cuts out, and it comes in and cuts out. You could do that with automation. So you could do an automation clip for gain, and then you could turn it up at that one part, and then the track will keep playing. And then when you want it to go away or quiet, then you would just turn it the opposite direction. So that would be for automation clips. You can also add FL keys, which is just like the typical keyboard. And I'm just like clicking in here. But we also have this option here enabled. So this little square here, and I'm jumping a little bit ahead, I'm sorry, but this little square here makes it so that way I can use my like regular like keyboard as a MIDI controller. So that's a really nice thing about FL, especially if you're wanting to use this at home. If you don't have a MIDI controller, as long as you have a physical keyboard, and this can be the one on your laptop, an external one, but as long as you have a keyboard, you can use that as a MIDI controller. It's obviously not as easy as using like a standard MIDI controller because it's not labeled. But once you kind of figure out like, oh, okay, so Q is C, you can kind of figure out where the different keys are, or you can use your mouse. So there's some of the things that you can find under add. Under patterns, this is where you can, so this window or this tab here, patterns, is basically the same thing as right clicking on where it says pattern here. They're the exact same window. They're just two different ways to get there. So clicking here and then right clicking here, you'll see they're the exact same options. So this is how you can add new patterns. This is how you can rename and color them. So color coding them is really helpful if you have several patterns. So if you're doing patterns for every section in your song or different instruments or everything like that for your patterns, it can be really, really helpful to both name and color them, but at least naming them will help you because all your patterns will be listed in this column right here. So we only have the one pattern here, so that's why we only see pattern 1. But as soon as I add a pattern and I start doing stuff, and okay, now I have another one, and then I have a third one, as I have patterns still be here, and there's no way to differentiate between them beyond naming and coloring them. So I can make all my drums blue, I can make all of my guitars red, I can make all of my bass orange, all my synths lime green, all different colors. Under view, this is how you would like enable or disable different windows. So right now the windows that are open are darker, the black text, and they also have the black check mark next to them. So if I wanted to re-enable the piano roll, I could click here and I could get to the piano roll from here. And that can be helpful if you're like, maybe you have a bunch of folders open, you're like, oh, do I still have that open or not? Then you can go over to view and you can see that it's not open. Under options, this is how you'll get to your project settings. So if you do have a MIDI keyboard that you want to use with it, under MIDI settings, this is where you would enable it actually. Okay, so I just turned on the MIDI controller here in Creative Experience. So you can see it has the KeyStation 88. These are the same thing. So it has the KeyStation 88, but it does not have this little green power symbol. So what I do is I click on the KeyStation, make sure it's the one highlighted in blue, and then down here where it says enable, I click the button to the left, and then now it has that symbol, and now I can use it to play. If you ever are in our recording room or at home and you're like, my MIDI keyboard's plugged in, it's getting power, why is it not working? It's probably just not enabled. And then also from here, you can also do your audio settings. So making sure that your interface is enabled or being recognized if you're using one. So ours is right here, the Focusrite. your general settings here. So just how you want your whole project to be set up. File, where everything is going to be saved. Project, here's where you'll set your time signature. So 4/4 is what most people are going to make their songs in. Um, uh, it's one of those like typical time signatures for most Western music. There are other time signatures. This one's the most common, which is why it's the default one, but you can change it to really anything that you want. And again, that affects how this plays back. So if I change it to something else, if I change it to 9, 2, then you can see that now I only have 2 bars here, and I have 9 of these little dots per bar. So that's what changing the time signature will affect directly, and how you'll be able to see how it's going to play back. So that's under your project settings. Info, this is if you want to title it. So your song, your songwriting name or your performer name, whatever genre. And then if you want comments, say this is the 2021 version, or a lot of times for comments, if I'm using a lot of like outboard gear or different instruments, I might want to say like, okay, I used this outboard gear on these settings for this song. That way, if I come back to this 2 weeks later, I know what I did in case I needed to redo something. So that'd be under info. And then these two here, these are just about FL Studio in general. I've never really had to do anything about these two over here. It's pretty much just these tabs here. And you would find this again under options. Under tools, there's 2 options in here that I probably use the most. The Smart Find. So if you know that there's something in FL that you want to use and you just cannot find it for some reason, Smart Find will help you get it. So when this pops up, and you can also get it from this little magnifying glass over here as well. So if I wanted to find kick, I search kick, and now it's going to come up and show me all the things that have kick or some type of like drum like element to it. It'll find it for me. So that's really nice. If you're like, I know it's in here, can't remember what folder it's under, Smart Find is very, very fast way to get there. The other thing that's really great is Riff Machine. So, oh my gosh. Sorry, let me pause it. Sorry about that. So what Riff Machine does is it creates riffs. It's very aptly named. So if you want to create melodies, create chord progression, things like that, and you don't really know how to do that, or that's just not something that you're maybe very good at or something, Riff Machine will do that for you. So I can hit random and it'll give me, different notes. And this is the piano roll here. So these note names are telling you what they are. So this is E4, so 4th octave, note E, and then up here is G4. And you can just hit random, and it's going to keep giving you different options. And if you hit accept, then it'll add that to your project. And so you could maybe like base your project around that, or use it to give you like inspiration. So the Riff Machine's pretty cool. Under help, this is just like your account stuff. So yeah, like getting more tutorials, support, forums, contacting FL Studio about like an issue with your software, your account, anything like that. Maybe maybe FL keeps crashing or something, you can contact them. That's what would be under help. So moving over to, so this is the second little picture that's here on the PDF. So this here is the master volume knob for the whole project. And then this is the master pitch. You can also use this to pitch individual notes if you have them like selected. So we don't really have anything going on right here, but this can, pitch it up or down depending on which way you move it. I've never used this. I've never really seen a point in using it because it would affect the whole project. Master volume, again, something else I usually just leave alone. If I want to affect the master for the whole project, I would probably do it over here on the mixer. But in general, you don't really want to, in my experience, like change the volume of the master. You usually want to leave that at 0, and then individually, raise things up. Like, if I want my guitars to be louder, well, I don't want to turn up the whole session to do that. I would just make the guitars louder. Yeah, and for me personally, I prefer not to mess with my mixer or mess with my master. Over here, this is showing you your playback versions. So pat is short for pattern. So what's on this, whenever we hit play, it's only playing within the pattern. If I switch to song, then it plays over here in the playlist. And I don't have anything over there, but it would play something and something was over there. So those are the two different playback versions. So pattern is always going to mean playing back from the channel rack, and song is always going to mean playing back from the playlist. So next we have the play, pause, and then stop buttons. The space bar would also serve both of those functions. So if something's playing and you hit space bar, pause. If something's pausing, space bar, that would be play. This button here is your record button. And we'll get more into that a little bit later when we talk about how to record. This is your record button here. This button here, or this section here, is your tempo. So default for all FL Studio program or all FL Studio projects, if you don't use any like template other than like a basic one, it's going to be 140. That's very fast. You may want to do something at 140, but that's pretty quick. So your two options for, well, you still for several options, but some of the main options for changing the tempo. So you can see I have a sort of like up and down arrow symbol here. If I hover over this area here, the 140, which is the minutes, and I left click and I hold down, if I move my mouse down, it lowers it. If I raise it up, it speeds it up. If I hover over these little zeros, these are the seconds. So up and down. You may want a very, very specific tempo. The other thing too is that you might be playing at a very specific tempo. So if I right click and I click on this one here that says tap, and I hit the T on my keyboard, or I use my mouse and I left click here in the center, depending on how fast I'm tapping, it's going to give me the average of how fast I tap. So you can see this little bar down here at the bottom. So once I start over tapping, it's going to start over. And once it gets to the end, it's going to give you the average. So if I keep tapping really, really fast. So my average is 294 beats per minute. Very, very fast. I probably would not want to actually play that fast. But that's how you can tap it. So if you recorded something without a metronome would obviously tell you what your tempo is because you'd be playing on beat. You played without a metronome, which I often do, and you want to know what your tempo is, you could play back your song and then in time tap to the beat, and then you'll know what your tempo is. Why is this important? Is again, because this is how fast this plays back. So something I do a lot is I'll play like guitar, something like that, and put it into like a program like FL or something like that. And then I would just, kind of sequence something here, like in the channel rack, and play it back. But if this was still at 140, but I was playing at 90, it's going to sound off. It's going to sound very, very off. So you want your tempo to be accurate so that way when you're like adding other instruments or things like that to it, everything is in time, everything's on beat. So you can scroll through here using the mouse, or you can right click and do tap, or you can choose some of these default settings that are here as well, or you can do type in value and you can put in whatever you want. So several ways to change the tempo in there. The tempo tabber is probably my favorite way to do it, but lots of different options. Down here, this is just showing you the song position. So wherever it is in time, and then this right here, which is like your little kind of like clock, will move accordingly. And that's will only go as long as how much audio or music you have recorded here in the playlist. So if I didn't have anything, there wouldn't be anything over there. But this is going to the end. You can see it's the end of the clip here as well. So it'll move accordingly. So that's the song position. So that doesn't affect anything but where it plays back from. The symbol over here is your metronome. So this will be if you wanted to add a metronome. And again, this metronome will be in time with your tempo here automatically. So if your tempo is wrong, your metronome will be off as well. This one here, wait for input to start playing. This applies to MIDI. So I have my MIDI controller. I'm using my physical keyboard here. And I want it to start the recording process as soon as I start playing. That's what I would choose there. Because if not, when you start recording, it'll record before you go. And that can maybe make you off time. You could start later. So instead, as soon as you hit one note, it's going to start recording. This will give you a countdown before it starts recording. So it'll go like 3, 2, 1. And if you have metronome on, it'll count 1, 2, 3 according to that tempo. Blend recording here. The blend recording is for like overdubbing over something you've already recorded. Loop recording is to, I really never use that. That would be if you wanted to record and have it looping over itself. The typing keyboard, we already talked about that. That's if you want to use regular keyboard here. The time marker, this is scroll through each time markers. So this would go through, if I had several time markers here in the playlist, it would go through each time marker. So maybe I have a very long session and I want to get to the chorus time marker or the pre-chorus or something like that. That's what I would use here. This is another one that I never used, but I believe this one is where you wouldn't be able to change anything. You would just be recording, not editing. This one is clip groups. So clip groups are what you see here. So they all have like their little individual name. These are clip groups. And then multi-lead controllers is another one that I also do not use, but I believe that relates to maybe outboard gear. The main ones that I use would probably be these ones up here, and then the typing keyboard if I don't have access to a MIDI controller. This one here, we already talked about. This is your song position and your length. When you click on it, and my my screen sharing is in the way, so I can't really see. But it'll either be minutes or seconds or bars and beats. And it should say in the upper right hand corner, which is covered up for me, but it'll show you either way. In the corner, it'll say like MS, and then it should say like maybe like BB. I really can't see it. Sorry. This right here is your snap to grid. So you can do line, cell, none, steps, which are equivalent to saying like semitone or tone. And then beat or bar, which again are these here. I usually leave this online. This is where it's going to snap here. So you can see it's like moving it in a certain increment. That's what's affected when you change this one here. Pattern we talked about here is the different patterns that you're using. And so as you scroll through them, you can see that they have sort of different patterns. And this also, again, is where you can right click to rename them. These buttons here are going to be how you disappear or re-enable those windows. So just like in View, we were able to do that. This is just another way to do that here. Other important buttons, this is a quick save button here as well. This is a quick audio recording. So this is basically one click and you would decide which one you're going to do, Edison or playlist. Which you can see we're running low on time, but let's see what I have not covered. Okay, so over here on this corner here, oh, sorry, any questions on these ones up here? I know it's a lot of information.
What does playlist mean? What do you mean, Edison or playlist? What do you mean by that? I'm sorry.
So playlist, yes. So that are these other windows that we haven't covered yet here. So channel rack is this one right here. This is where all of your instruments will be that you would pull over. So like if I were to pull over an instrument and drag it over here, and now I have this, closed grand virtual piano to play with my MIDI keyboard, that's what the channel rack is for. So this is for all your instruments that you're going to be playing. And then this is where all your patterns are created, is your channel rack. After you've created a pattern, you would come over here to your playlist. And this is where you would, so like if I select and I have this highlighted in green, pattern 2, I can arrange these patterns and see over here, and I can arrange these here as well. And this is where you arrange your whole song. So if you remember when I was talking before about this difference between pattern and song, so pattern is just where you're playing these little like short snippets from the channel rack. Song is where you're playing this whole thing here. So your playlist is where you're arranging your whole song with all the different patterns that you made here in the channel rack. So that's what your playlist is. And you can assign these over here to the mixer, and your mixer is where you can adjust the volume using these faders and the panning, so either going left or right. So like more to the left, ear, like if you're listening in headphones or speakers, or more to the right. And then also where you can record enable. So if I want to make sure that I'm only recording on insert 1, or if I'm recording on more than one, I can record enable both of these. So all the windows really work together as like sort of like one cohesive thing, but they all do different things. So the mixer window only affects those 3 things I talked about: the volume here, the panning, and then like the record enable. The playlist is where you arrange your song. So when you've recorded audio and you want to line that up with maybe some of the like patterns that you've done, or if you're recording like a guitar in here as well as audio, this is where you would line up and arrange your song. If I make a drum pattern over here on the channel rack and I don't put it over here, then that's not part of my song. It's just a pattern that I've made and it's just on the channel rack. It would have to be put over here. Is that a little less confusing? I know it's a lot of windows.
Yeah, that helped. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. The only other window I did not talk about here is the piano roll. So the piano roll is where you can draw or edit like individual MIDI notes. So you'll get this draw tool here, which if you get off of it, is this guy here. It looks like a little pencil. And if I click in here, it'll tell me what note that I'm playing, and you have this great visual piano roll or piano over here as well. And each one is a different line. So you have your sharps, it automatically does sharps, it doesn't show flats, but the enharmonic equivalent. So it's showing like D sharp, but would also be E flat. And so you can paste these anywhere in here. But you gotta know that sounds really bad, but you're able to draw in notes. So if you don't have access to a MIDI keyboard, if you don't have access to a physical keyboard, maybe you're doing this on your phone or tablet or something like that, you can draw in these notes, and you can change how long or short they are. You can also change how loud each individual note is. And this is super helpful, again, if you don't have access to have the ability to play, or if you're just not really skilled in playing, you could draw in here chords, you could draw in here chord progressions that you don't have to physically play. You can just draw them in. And so you can see over here, so you can see like this mess that I've created here. You have a tiny scaled version of it over here on my pattern 3. And then if you look over here in my playlist, you have again that scaled version showing up here in pattern 3. So whenever I make something in the piano roll, you can see here, if I click this drop down, I have all the different instruments that I've added over here in my channel rack that reflects over here. So I can click the FL keys, and now these items here are grayed out. I can no longer change the closed grand notes that I've done, but now I can change and move around the FL key notes that I made. And I can make them longer, I can make them shorter, things like that. And again, I can change the individual velocity, the volume, how loud or how soft it was hit. And so that's the great thing about the piano roll. You can also quantize notes in here. So quantize means basically making them on beat and sort of like lined up. So when you play live, you may be a little off because you're human. You're not like a perfect playing machine. So you may be a little bit off. You can either manually quantize by being like, oh, this note was a little off, let me move it over. Or you can use the quantize feature under tools, and it'll do that for you. So that's what the quantize feature is. Over here on this side here is where you'll grab those instruments. So under packs, you have your options for all your drums. Your instruments have your bass, your guitar, your keyboards. These have strings like the brass, the strings, woodwinds, like harps, things like that. Legacy just has more drum instrument sounds. There's sound effects like spaceship sounds, glass breaking, wind chimes, things like that. So you would find all of those here. And this is also where you can find your history. So these are all the things that I've done in this session so far. And so if I wanted to go back, I could undo everything I did up to that point. So this is a very, very quick way to undo and then to also redo. Beyond just hitting undo up here in edit, or to hit undo by doing like Control Z. Just a quick way to do that. And then this is your plugin database. So all of your effects and then things like Sense are also under here. So a lot in FL is like 10 different ways to get to the same window. You can pretty much get to the same windows from either up here, over here, and then also from within the mixer as well. So from the mixer, if I select a channel, so like insert one, and I go over to slot one and I click this drop down, I get those same effects and plugins that are under here and that are under here as well. So it's the same window, but many, many ways to get there. So FL can seem like very daunting and complicated and all these different windows, but it's really like 10 windows, but like 50 ways to get to those 10 different windows. We're just about out of time. The last thing that I want to show you, and everything that I explained is condensed into the PDF. But down here for how to record. So again, a zillion ways to be able to record in FL Studio. But the main way that you'll probably do, and I would recommend doing it, is up here on the record button. So you'll left click on it and you'll get this window that appears. So if you want to record live audio, you have your microphone or something, and you're recording your guitar, you're recording your voice, you're recording your live piano, you'll choose one of these two things. It's going to depend on what you're doing and what you want to do, whether you're going to do Edison Recorder or the playlist. Into the playlist is what I do most of the time. It's very simple because once you record that audio, it's going to automatically paste it into the playlist in line and in time, which is usually what you're going to want. The Edison Recorder is just going to have editing options specifically for that piece of audio. And so like we can click it so you can, of course, this is not working. Oops. Okay, they just did updates and I think some things are a little off with FL, unfortunately, but the Edison Recorder will just have direct audio editing capabilities. So fading in and out, looping that audio selection, like trimming it, you know, down to like being able to zoom in and like, okay, I want to take this part out. Some more in-depth editing is what you can do in the Edison recorder. When you put it into the playlist, it's going to paste it in there sort of as is, which doesn't mean you can't edit it. It's just not as like as detailed as it will be into the Edison recorder. If you're going to record MIDI, most times I'm just going to do notes and automation. That's the simplest to do. It's going to make it where it's not picking up your microphone or anything like that. It's just recording the MIDI notes either on your keyboard or on your MIDI controller. Everything would be where it's, you know, recording automation. You know, if you're changing things like on your knobs here, it's going to be recording that. It's going to be recording any MIDI notes. And it should also pick up your microphones if they're on. So that's sort of the gist of the recording. And then the other things that are on here on the end of the PDF are the mixing things. So the reverb, the compression, and the EQ. We won't have time to get into those in depth, but how you would add those is here on the mixer window. So you would select whichever insert you wanted to go on. So again, if insert 1 is your guitar, you would select it so it has this green little box here, and you'd go over to slot 1 or, you know, however many effects you have on there. You'd click it, and then you would add your compressor, and this would only be compressing this track. And then I could click on number 2 and choose a different one, and then I can always go back to number 1 and affect that compressor again and edit it. And then lastly, we just had how to save, which is pretty similar to how it was in Audacity, just going to File Save if you're going to just save the project, and then File Export if you're going to export your file as either a WAV or MP3 file. And if you want to export your individual tracks, say you're going to put this into another program like I often do, so you want all the different tracks here, so these tracks like 1, 2, which would probably correspond over here, that would be exporting, and then all playlist tracks. And again, I know it's so much information, but it's all detailed in the PDF that was emailed to you. And then, as always, you can ask questions either right now if you have any immediate ones, or by emailing as well.
I have a quick question about what you just said about saving individual tracks.
Yes.
Save the individual tracks. Is each one saved separately?
Yes.
Your piano, so each one goes out as a separate file, even though you say save all tracks?
Yes. So so what it means, so the difference is, so when you do export as like WAV, MP3, all these ones here, it's exporting everything that you did, especially like, so everything that's here in this playlist is exporting all of that as one thing.
Correct.
When you export all playlist tracks, that means, and yeah, it is a little confusing because it's saying export all, but what it means is that it's exporting all of those as individual tracks. So it'll export the whole track, the whole length. So like, for example, it'll export all of this and all of this and all of this, but individually, which you may want if you're going to maybe send them to someone to mix for you, if you're not going to do the mixing yourself, or if you want to import them into another DAW. So you may have, maybe you only have Audacity at home because it's, you know, free open source to get. So you come to the library and you record everything. Well, now you want to go home and mix. You could export all the tracks, email them to yourself, go home, and then export those audio, or import those audio tracks into Audacity to then mix and continue to edit.
Yes, thank you. That answered that question. Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Okay, great. Well, if there are no other questions, that's about all I had in a very condensed manner. And next week we will be talking about Studio One. which is another one that you can get like a free trial version or like a free version or very cheap version. And I will again talk about how to obtain that software and then kind of run through some of the basics of Studio One. Studio One is another one that has a lot of options, so we will do a lot of condensing.